Link's Awakening isn't like modern Zelda games. It doesn't have an open world, you can't go wherever you want, and most importantly, the dungeons have a set order. And this order is non-negotiable. Usually, to enter the next dungeon, you need an item from the previous one. And not only that, but you also need certain story triggers that only show up when the previous dungeon is beaten in its entirety. You have to beat dungeons 1 through 8 in sequential order. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Well, that's not exactly true. Because Link's Awakening may be the most broken Zelda game to have ever existed. It is so broken that you can beat the game in whatever order you want. It is so broken that you can completely ignore the story and beat the game backwards. Doing this though is not for the faint of heart, because to beat Link's Awakening backwards, you have to pull off some of the hardest tricks in the game. Tricks that would make a grown man cry. And trust me, they did. Because I attempted this challenge. I attempted to beat Link's Awakening backwards, and it broke me. So, before we get into the run, I want to go over what exactly beating Link's Awakening backwards is going to look like. In this game, Link is given the task to collect the 8 instruments of the Sirens, so that he can awaken the Windfish and leave Koholint Island. You get one of these instruments each time you beat one of the game's 8 dungeons. So essentially, we have to collect these instruments in reverse order, which is basically just beating the dungeons in reverse order. And the keyword here is beating, because we can actually enter any dungeon we like at any time. As long as we don't actually beat the dungeon itself, we are still technically beating the game backwards. And you're probably thinking, oh, so you're just gonna go into every dungeon, get the item there, leave before you beat it, and then progress to the game normally, aren't you? That's not fun. That's not interesting. That's boring. Press A, you're pathetic. Oh friend, I wish it was that easy. While a lot of this game is locked behind obtaining certain items, a lot of it is also locked behind certain story triggers that will only appear once you've beaten certain dungeons. For example, the Chain Chomp that you need to rescue to enter the second dungeon can only be rescued after you've beaten the first. Without it, you can't enter the second dungeon no matter what items you have. So don't think this is going to be easy just because we can enter dungeons and leave them early. Because trust me, it's not. Now, with that being said, let's get into the run. Hey guys, just a quick reminder to subscribe if you like what we do here on the channel. We're really trying to hit 50,000 before the end of the year, so if you could help us do that, that would be amazing. Thank you. Link's Awakening on the Game Boy Color is one of my favorite games of all time. I got it when I was really young. In fact, I was so young, I couldn't even spell my name right. But yeah, it's one of the first games I remember playing. And playing in this context is a generous word, because most of the time I wouldn't make any progress, I would just wander around killing things with my sword. As I got a bit older though, and developed a few more brain cells, I was finally able to beat the game. And even as a kid, I always hated how it ended. Throughout the game, you find out that Koholint Island and all of its inhabitants are all just a dream thought up by the sleeping Windfish. Once you collect the 8 instruments and awaken the Windfish, the island and everyone you've met on your adventure just cease to exist. But maybe today, we don't have to suffer the same fate. Maybe by beating the game in this weird way, we can stop all this from happening. Maybe beating the game backwards can save Koholint Island and all who live there. I knew it was a long shot, but I still wanted to try. So the first thing I did was walk down to the beach and grabbed myself a sword. I then headed to the mysterious forest, got a mushroom, turned it into some magic powder, used that power to save Tarin from a terrible curse, which then allowed me to grab the key to the first dungeon of the game, Tail Cave. But don't get comfortable because we won't be here for long. I basically just completed a couple rooms and then nabbed myself Rock's Feather, which is maybe one of the coolest and most important items in this run. Rock's Feather allows Link to jump, and let me tell you, jumping will allow us to completely break this game. But that'll have to wait for a little bit, because right now, we're gonna break the game in a different way. As it stands right now, we only have access to the first dungeon. But if we're gonna beat this game backwards, we need to get access to the 8th dungeon, which means we're gonna need a couple more items. The first item we need is the Power Bracelet, which allows us to pick up heavy objects like pots or boulders. The problem is, the Power Bracelet is found in the 2nd dungeon, the Bottle Grotto. But we can't get to the 2nd dungeon, because like I mentioned earlier, to do so, you need to rescue the Chain Chomp. But since we haven't beaten the 1st dungeon yet, the Moblins haven't taken the Chain Chomp, so we can't rescue him. What we can do though, is absolutely break the game. If we take this cuckoo found in Mabe Village, all the way through the mysterious forest to the telephone booth right beside Mr. Wright's house, we can perform a trick I don't actually know the name of, but I'll call the like jump. Normally, when Link gets eaten by a like, it'll spit him out straight into the air. Now, unfortunately, we can't do much with this because you can't move Link while he's in the air. So he'll just go straight up and down. Now, if we could move Link while he was in the air like this, we could use like lights to get on top of walls or obstacles, skipping them completely. Which is where this cuckoo comes in. If we stand right in front of the phone booth with the cuckoo above our head and get eaten by the like, the cuckoo, which normally would just drop to the ground, gets stuck on the phone booth and remains above our head. Now, when the like spits Link out, he'll come in contact with the cuckoo, which will actually cause him to be shot out at an angle instead of straight up. If we angle it correctly, we can actually be shot straight up on these trees. And for some reason, these trees have collision, so if we get on top of them, we can basically walk wherever we want, which includes straight to the 2nd dungeon. If we hop down off the trees onto these thorns and make a couple jumps, we can make our way to the entrance of the 2nd dungeon. At that point, we can jump off the thorns and over the flowers, blocking the entrance to the Bottle Grotto. Now, this trick wasn't super hard or anything, but it was still pretty annoying. The worst part about it is that the like lights do 1 heart of damage each time you try this. And since we only have 3 hearts, it would mean I only had 3 attempts at this before I would game over and have to walk this stupid chicken all the way through the forest again. Which happened a lot. But once you actually do the jump and get on top of the trees, the rest really isn't too bad. The first time I got up there, I got hit by this fish right before I made the final jump, which is honestly kind of funny. But yeah, after I got up there again and did the final jump correctly, I made it to the Bottle Grotto no problem. Just like with the first dungeon, we made it halfway through the Bottle Grotto, defeated these 2 boos, and got ourselves the Power Bracelet, which like I mentioned earlier, now allows us to pick up heavy objects. After that, I went back to Mabe Village and stole the shovel and the bow from this poor shopkeeper. So after beating the 2nd dungeon, the game wants you to do this little side quest to find 5 golden leaves for this guy named Richard, who will then give you access to Pothole Fields, where you can find the key for the 3rd dungeon. The problem is, to get to the castle where these 5 golden leaves are hidden, you need to give bananas to this monkey. And this monkey will not trade with you unless you've already beaten the 2nd dungeon. But since we can't do that, we're gonna have to find another way into Pothole Fields. However, Pothole Fields is locked down pretty tight. No matter which way you approach it, there doesn't seem to be a way in. At least, at first. Because there is a way in. It's just so horrible that I wish there wasn't. To get into Pothole Fields without Richard's help, we're gonna need to make use of this enemy called Pincer. The first thing you want to do is kill the Pincer on the right because, trust me, he's gonna fuck your day up. Then, once the 2nd Pincer comes out of the hole, you want to throw magic powder on his face and stun him. At that point, you want to pick him up and bring him over to the trees at the bottom of the screen. Then throw him at the trees and stay under his body so he's basically balancing on your head. Next, you need to jump up and sword slash, which will angle his body further into the air. Unfortunately, this will cause him to wake up, so you need to use your magic powder once again to stun him quickly. Now, you need to walk into the hole that he's coming out of, which will spawn you on his back. Then, run along his back and jump so you can reach the top of the trees. Now, you can run along the trees like we did earlier, jump across this gap, then fall into pothole fields. All without the help of Richard and his stupid golden leaves. Unfortunately, this is all easier said than done, because this trick is a complete nightmare. First of all, you only get one shot at this. The pincer dies in 2 hits, and since you have to hit it once to knock it higher into the air, it means if you try this trick a second time, it'll just die. Which means you have to reload your save and try all over again. Which doesn't seem like a big deal, but trust me, it wastes a bunch of time. Second, getting this thing in the right position is so goddamn hard. Bringing it to the tree is pretty easy, but making sure it stays in the correct position after you knock it with the sword is such a pain in the ass. This is because after you knock it with the sword, it wants to wake up, and as soon as it wakes up, it'll retract back into the hole. And let me tell you, if this thing retracts even a little bit, you're not making it to that tree. The jump from its back to the tree is so precise, it needs to be in the exact right position, or you're just not gonna make it. I have so much footage of me just failing the jump over and over again because it wasn't close enough. You need to be picture perfect with the magic powder so this thing doesn't move at all. Which is really hard because the timing has to be perfect and the position you're in when you throw the powder also has to be perfect. I don't know if it's a perspective thing, but a lot of places you throw it from just don't work. You have to basically be above him looking down at his head from an angle. You basically have to throw him towards the tree, jump, slash, then quickly run upwards, turn around, and throw magic powder with perfect timing. The problem is though, even if you do all this correctly, getting on his back can also be a pain. I'm not sure if I'm just bad, which obviously the answer to that is yes, but I could only get on his back like 3 out of 4 times I tried, and that was with a lot of practice. You basically have to fall in the hole from the front, because whatever side of a pit Link falls into is the side he'll spawn on. So if you fall from the front, it'll spawn you in front of the hole, which just happens to be on top of his body. But so many times, it looked like I entered the hole from the front, but it would just respawn me in from the side. And once this happens, you have to reload the game again, because you don't have enough time to get on his back and to the trees before he wakes up again. All of this caused me to try this trick over and over and over again. But after about an hour of trying, this happened. Yeah, turns out making this jump across the gap is also a pain in the ass. For some reason, it's really precise. And do you want to know how I know it's precise? It's because Linkus, one of the best Zelda speedrunners in the world, said it's precise. So if that man said it's precise, then it's precise. I'm being a little melodramatic here, because overall, it wasn't really a big deal. Because at that point, I had been practicing the first part of this trick so much, I could get back up there and jump across the gap no problem. I'm kidding! I fucking fell again! And I lied! I wasn't good at the first part! It took me 30 minutes to get back up here! Eventually though, after all that bullshit, I was able to make it back up on the trees, make it across the gap, and grab the key to the 3rd dungeon. And in that 3rd dungeon, we did the same thing we did in the previous 2, which was make it about halfway through and grab the item that was inside. The item in question being the Pegasus Boots, an item that allows Link to run super fast, and when paired up with the Rot's Feather, allows him to jump great distances. So after I left the 3rd dungeon, I made my way back to Mabe Village and entered the Dream Shrine, where I used our newly found Pegasus boots to grab myself the ocarina, which can be used to play a number of different songs which have a myriad of uses. One of which we learn from Marin as soon as we exit the Dream Shrine. Now what the game wants us to do is head to Animal Village and find a walrus blocking our way to Yarna Desert. We would then have to come back to Mabe Village, grab Marin, and get her to play a song to wake up the sleeping walrus. At that point, we can make our way through Yarna Desert, kill the mini-boss there, and grab ourselves the key to the 4th dungeon. But we of course can't do any of that. Remember, we haven't even beaten the 1st dungeon yet. So when we go to the beach to meet up with Marin, she just isn't there. And if Marin isn't there, we can't get her to wake up the walrus. So what are we gonna do? Well, luckily for us, there's another trick we can do to skip all of this. But if you thought the last trick was bad, just wait until you get a look at this one. This trick is called the Angler Key Skip, specifically the Acorn version, because there are 2 more versions of this trick, but somehow they're even worse than this one. To do this trick, we have to first set up a Guardian Acorn drop. Guardian Acorns drop after you've killed 14 enemies in a row without taking damage. So we need to kill 13 enemies to set up this trick. Thankfully, after you've done this, you can save, and the game will keep this information stored so you don't have to kill 13 enemies every time you want to attempt this trick. And thank God, because that would have drove me fucking nuts. So now that the Acorn drop is set up, we have to actually get it to drop in the correct spot. And the correct spot just happens to be at the top of this ladder. But getting it to actually spawn there is kind of just random bullshit. What you need to do is lure this moblin down this small corridor. Once he's far enough down it, you want to walk away from him so he loses interest in you. Then you want to use the Pegasus Boots rock feather combination I mentioned earlier and jump over his head. Next, you want to force him down the corridor and get him in the right position, which involves you rubbing up against this wall and slowly pushing him back until he reaches this wall here. Once that's done, you want to quickly run up and touch the top wall and quickly kill the moblin before he moves too far. If done correctly, the acorn will drop somewhere in the vicinity of the first rung of the ladder. Now that the acorn's set up in the right spot, you want to use the Pegasus Boots to jump to the other side of the acorn. Doing all this was to set up a trick called Air Climb. Air Climb occurs when Link's animation for reaching the top of the ladder is interrupted by something else, and in this case, it's picking up this acorn. So if you climb to the top of the ladder and hit the acorn just as Link is finishing his animation, he'll keep climbing. But instead of on the ladder, he'll just be climbing nothing. You need to then climb this nothing all the way to the top, jump over to the right, and land on an invisible wall, which you can then slide along and jump off right as you reach the corner. Now, you want to hold down on the joystick so you land on the wall below, which you then walk along until you reach the entrance of the 4th dungeon. And with a quick Pegasus jump, you can reach it no problem. It's funny I said no problem there, because this whole fucking trick is a problem. Every single step in this process is a mess. Let's first start with the acorn. Getting this thing to drop in the right position is such a bitch. The area it has to drop in isn't super specific, but it still is pretty specific. If it gets too close to the ladder, Link will grab it before he's done climbing. And if it's too far away, Link will get off the ladder before he grabs it. Both of these will cause the trick not to work. It has to be in the exact sweet spot where Link is in the animation of getting off the ladder, and that's the only place it works. It is so easy for the acorn to drop just millimeters from where it's supposed to be. Or if the moblin just doesn't cooperate, it could be nowhere even close. Or you can get it exactly where you want it and just mess up the jump and pick it up when you're not supposed to. All of these things force you to reset and waste a ton of time. But even when the stars align and you do get it in the right spot, it's still not even close to being over. Because the worst part of this trick is jumping on this invisible wall. Since the wall's invisible, you don't really know where to jump. And since the ladder's also invisible, you don't know where it ends. Which is a problem, because you have to be at the very top of it to even make it to the other invisible wall in the first place. So what would usually happen is I would either climb too high and fall off the ladder, or jump too far or too short to make it onto the wall. The odd chance I actually got on the wall, I wouldn't fare much better. This is because when Link's on top of the wall, he doesn't actually walk on it. He kind of just slides around. And I still don't really understand how the sliding works. I basically just rocked the joystick back and forth until I got unstuck and slid forward. But a lot of the time, this would cause me to just fall off. Sometimes I would make it to the corner, but I would just fall off there as well, because what I didn't mention earlier is that you only have a 4-frame window once you touch that corner to actually jump. So you're basically trying to jump off a ladder you can't see, onto a wall you can't see, and then jump off a corner you can't see. It's a nightmare. Once in a while, like 1 in every 50 attempts, I would actually jump off the corner properly, but a lot of the time I would just jump over the wall at the bottom or hold the joystick down too much and fall off the opposite side. And even if you get on the wall below, walking on it still isn't easy. It looks pretty wide and easy to walk on, but it's not. You have to walk on this little tiny edge of the wall. If it's anywhere else, you'll just fall off. But despite all of these obstacles, despite all of this bullshit, I was finally able to do this. Yeah, the enemies can just still hit you while you're on the wall. Isn't that fun? Isn't that so much fun? But guess what? These moblins messed with the wrong man. Because nothing was going to stop me from doing this. Not acorns, not invisible walls, and certainly not this fat With the Moblin Spear literally tickling my butt cheeks, I was able to run along the wall and make the jump across the river into the waterfall, finally giving me access to the game's 4th dungeon. So yeah, that ended up taking me 2 hours and hundreds of attempts. But we're just gonna ignore all that and move on to the Angler's Tunnel. In the Angler's Tunnel, we do the same thing we've done in every other dungeon so far. Make it halfway through, fight the mini-boss, and grab the dungeon item, the flippers, which does exactly what you think they would do, allows us to swim in water. After they were obtained, I left the dungeon and immediately used them to learn Mambo's Mumbo. Once that's done, we head straight over to the 5th dungeon, the Catfish's Maw. Unlike the other dungeons we've encountered so far in this run, the Catfish's Maw isn't locked behind any story trigger. The only thing stopping us from getting there is the water. But since we have the flippers now, we can enter the dungeon without an issue. Shortly after we enter, I make quick work of the skeleton mini-boss and grab myself the hook shot, an item that allows Link to latch himself onto objects and pull himself towards them. I once again leave the dungeon early without beating it and make my way to the ancient ruins to look for another dungeon key. I should mention that by this point, I was getting pretty far into the game and I still only had 3 hearts. Since we should have already beaten 5 dungeons, the game expects us to have at least 8 hearts by this point. But again, I only have 3. And these guys here do 2 damage each, which means they can kill me in 2 hits. In fact, most of the enemies in the game at this point do at least 1 heart of damage. So as we get further into the game, I have to be increasingly more careful if I want to survive this. But yeah, we make it through the ancient ruins and face off against this big guy with a shield, who, once defeated, will give us the key to the 6th dungeon. So the room directly after the mini-boss fight has a mural that tells Link some pretty interesting information. This is the point in the game where Link learns that Koholint Island is just a dream. And if he succeeds in his goal of waking the Windfish, the island and everyone he knows on it will vanish. And even though we had been working so hard at beating the game backwards, I was beginning to think that this would be our fate as well. It felt like no matter what we did, the destruction of the island and its people was inevitable. But as I left the ruins, I noticed something. Usually, when you beat the game in the correct order, an owl will come and talk to you after you leave the ruins. But as I left, there was no owl to be found. In fact, I hadn't really seen the owl throughout this entire playthrough. Aside from a couple of times at the very start of the game, the owl just wasn't showing up when he was supposed to be. If you didn't know, the owl in this game kind of acts like a guide throughout Koholint Island. He gives Link hints on where to go next, and is even the one who gave him the task of waking the Windfish in the first place. The owl is the key to the story, and if he's not here, it means the story can't progress. So maybe we have a chance here. Maybe we can save everyone. So after I left the ruins, I used my newly found hookshot to make my way to the Face Shrine, the 6th dungeon of the game. While I was there, I quickly grabbed the level 2 bracelet and promptly left the dungeon. At this point, the game wants you to complete this sign puzzle southeast of Mabe Village. Once done, you'll learn the Fraud's Song of Soul, which can be used to bring back this blue cuckoo from the dead, which you then need to use to fly across this huge gap to make it to the 7th dungeon. But we aren't going to the 7th dungeon, because we now have everything we need to head straight to the 8th, and finally start beating this game backwards. But to actually get there, we are gonna need that blue cuckoo. So I do the sign puzzle, learn the song, reawaken the cuckoo, then make my way to the ladder leading to the tall mountain range. Because we're about to perform another trick with some invisible walls and some invisible ladders. Thankfully though, this one isn't nearly as bad as the last. To do this trick, you need to first place the blue cuckoo at the top of the ladder. Kind of in the same area we placed the acorn last time, but it's not nearly as precise. Then you want to climb down the ladder, jump back up it, and slightly push forward on the joystick. Next, you want to grab the cuckoo and once again push slightly forward on the joystick, which will cause Link to slowly glide forward. Once he reaches the last rung of the ladder, the screen will shift a little bit. As soon as that shift happens, you want to push forward on the joystick again, and if done correctly, Link will start climbing the invisible ladder with the cuckoo in his hands. Then you want to jump off the ladder, onto an invisible wall, slowly glide to the right, throw the cuckoo, then jump to the ledge. In all honesty, this trick wasn't that bad. Getting the timing down for the screen shift was a little rough. It was really tight, and most of the time, I would mess it up, and Link would just get stuck at the edge of the ladder and fall through the ground. Eventually though, I did get used to the timing, and doing it became pretty consistent. Jumping on the invisible wall, however, was a complete crapshoot. Mostly because it's invisible, and I couldn't see it. But once I got on the wall, actually jumping from it to the ledge was fairly trivial. I say fairly trivial because this trick still took me over an hour to do. So while it was easier than the Angler's Key skip from before, it still really wasn't that easy. But yeah, guys, we made it to the 8th dungeon, which doesn't actually require a key. We just have to beat this dragon guy and we're good. Now we can start beating the game backwards. I basically completed the 8th dungeon like normal, which was a bit surprising because I thought for sure we would need the mirror shield at some point, which is an item you get from the 7th dungeon, which we obviously didn't do yet. But it turns out you don't need it, and I could beat it just fine. The boss of the dungeon was a little scary, and I only managed to beat him with half a heart left, But now that we finally got another heart container, dying shouldn't be as big of a worry. Oh, I should also mention that we got the fire rod as well. An item that was super broken in the original game, but one you got so late that you couldn't really make use of it. So I was really excited to just plow through the entire game with this super broken item. But in the Switch version, the fire rod kinda sucks. And to make matters worse, some of the early game bosses aren't even affected by it, so that was really disappointing. But yeah, with all that being said, we collected our first instrument of the run. And it looked really funny when I went to save, and the only instrument I had was the last one you're supposed to get. So now that we basically have every item in the game, we can kind of just go anywhere we want, and everything is open to us. But instead of taking the intended path to the 7th dungeon, we're gonna do something a little more fun. If we jump off this ledge with the blue cuckoo, then you can land on these rocks. If we carefully jump from rock to rock, we can make our way over to this falling boulder section of Tal Mountain. I then make my way through the boulders and perform another ladder trick. But unlike the last one, where our goal was to climb up an invisible ladder, this time we just want to clip through the floor. So all we have to do is get to the edge of the ladder again, grab the cuckoo, and then jump while pressing forward. This will clip us straight through the floor. Now we can walk out of bounds and just climb up the mountain. For some reason, this entire mountain has collision all over it, even though you're never supposed to walk up here. Now we can just walk behind the egg and perform a running jump to get us back in bounds. And now that that's done, we can perform another ladder trick, which will get us out of bounds and place us right in front of the 7th dungeon, where we can perform a third ladder trick to get us up on this cliff and enter the dungeon. All of this was completely unnecessary, but I thought it looked cool and it was technically faster, so I decided to just do it anyways. But yeah, we now have access to every dungeon in the game. There is nothing stopping us anymore from just beating this game backwards. We don't need any tricks, we don't need any glitches, we can just beat the dungeons normally, but in reverse order. Which is exactly what I do. I do perform a couple of tricks to speed things up, like this one in Dungeon 7, where I angle myself with a jump and hit this switch with a bomb arrow, granting us the mirror shield early. Or this trick in Dungeon 6, called a wall slide, which skips a large portion of the dungeon. Or this very precise hookshot in Dungeon 5, which you perform by slightly angling yourself with a jump, then aligning Link's ear with this spot on the wall. This saves a bunch of time, as we don't need to get the small key to open up this block. But yeah, most of the dungeons are pretty straightforward, and they actually get easier as we go, because each dungeon we beat, we get another full heart container, which means by the time we get to the final boss of the first dungeon, we have 10 heart pieces when we're only supposed to have 3. So this poor guy has no chance. But either way, we kill him without mercy and collect the final instrument, which is really supposed to be the first one we get, but in our case, it's the last. We can now play all 8 instruments in front of the giant egg on Mount Tamaranch and head in to fight the final boss of the game. Wait, what? What's going on? So, it turns out, I completely forgot about this maze. To get through this maze, you have to follow a certain path. You have to choose the correct direction in each room 8 separate times. If you get it wrong, you get sent back to the beginning. And you're probably wondering, how would you ever know what the correct direction is? Well, it's because the game tells you what it is. After a long trading sequence with a bunch of different characters, you obtain the magnifying glass, which allows you to read a book in the Mabe library, which tells you exactly which way to go. Unfortunately, this sequence is randomized for each new file of Link's Awakening, so I couldn't just go online and look up what it was supposed to be because my solution is different from everyone else's. The way speedrunners get around this is that they hard reset their console and then boot it up at a specific time. This is because whatever creates a solution to the maze is somehow tied to which time your console is booted up at. So if you boot it up at a specific time, the solution to the puzzle will always be the same, and you'll know exactly what it is. Unfortunately for us, I didn't know about this before I started the run, so I didn't boot it up at a specific time. I couldn't even tell you what time I booted it up at, because I have no idea. So this isn't going to help us at all, which means we have to do the trading quest, and that might be a problem. Since the last dungeon we beat was the first of the game now thinks we're in a state after Dungeon 1, but before Dungeon 2. Which is why when we go back to Mabe Village, the kids are freaking out and Bow Wow the Chain Chomp is missing. Remember, we're supposed to rescue the Chain Chomp and then use him to enter Dungeon 2. So the game thinks we're trying to enter Dungeon 2, but we're not. We're trying to end the game. Which maybe won't be an issue, but I was worried it might affect the trading quest. I was worried some characters wouldn't be where they were supposed to be, or just wouldn't trade with us, like the monkey I mentioned earlier. For the most part though, I was wrong. Even the monkey traded with us, which I was surprised about. In fact, everything was looking good, until we had to bring this broom to the old lady in Mabe Village. She's usually found right outside Old Man Yulrira's house, but for some reason, in my file, she just wasn't there. I didn't know if it was because Mabe Village was still in a weird state of the moblins just attacking and Bow Wow being gone, so I decided to rescue Bow Wow myself and bring him back to see if it fits things. Which, it didn't. She was still gone. Which meant I had just soft-locked the game. Everything we had worked so hard to do, all the impossible tricks we conquered, beating every goddamn dungeon backwards, had all been for nothing. I didn't know the solution to the maze, and I now had no way to find out. Our dreams of beating the game backwards and saving Koholint Island from sure destruction had just vanished. Well, they would have, if I wasn't just a complete dumbass. It turns out the old woman doesn't just show up in Mabe Village, but she can show up in the Animal Village as well. And sure enough, when I made it to Animal Village, she was just sitting there waiting for her broom. Crisis averted. After that, I was able to complete the trading quest, get myself the magnifying glass, and find out the stupid solution to this stupid maze. Which meant the time had come. We had beaten the game backwards and made it to the final boss. And I was hopeful. Things felt different. The story felt different. It hadn't progressed normally. So maybe the ending would be different too. So sword in hand, I gathered my courage and faced off against the final nightmare. As I plunged my sword into the beast a final time, a thought crossed my mind. Surely this would be enough. Surely this would save Koholint. But as soon as the nightmare vanished, an all too familiar staircase came into view. I knew what this staircase meant. I knew where it led. We hadn't changed anything. It was all just an illusion. Everything we worked so hard to achieve, all the signs the game gave us, were all just a lie. The game was gonna play out like it always did, and nothing we did was gonna change that. In the Link's Awakening manga, there's a sequence where Link finds out what waking the Windfish will do to the island. Learning that his quest may bring an end to all of the island's inhabitants, he abandons it, and instead hops on a boat with Marin and tries to escape the island. However, after hours of paddling, they notice something strange. No matter how far away they get from the island never seems to change in size. No matter how hard they paddle or how hard they work, the island is just always there. They realize that escape from the island is impossible, and the only way that Link is getting off of it is alone. Sometimes it can feel like no matter what you do, you can't change anything. Like your life is set on some destined path, and no matter how hard you work or how hard you try to better yourself, the result will always be the same. But it's not true. No matter how it may feel or how bleak it may seem, your actions can make a difference, no matter how small that difference may be. You probably aren't surprised by this at all, but turns out beating the game backwards does nothing to affect the story. But there is one thing that does, because Link's Awakening has a secret ending. After Link has freed the Windfish from its eternal nightmare and escaped Koholint Island, the credits will play. If the player has played a perfect game and not died once throughout their adventure, a cutscene will play after the credits. This cutscene shows a dreamlike apparition of Marin, and after it fades away, a seagull flies into view. Now, to us, this doesn't really make sense because we basically ignored Marin throughout this entire playthrough. But if you talk to her throughout the story, she'll tell you her wishes of becoming a seagull so that she can fly as far away from Koholint Island as possible. And even though you can't save Koholint Island or the people that live there, if you, the player, play a perfect game, you can grant Marin this one wish. This video was made possible through the support of our amazing patrons. I want to give a special shout out to Rebecca Lyons, Lay Burb, Puddles Megan, and Koi Koi 13.